Okay. Okay, it's working this time. Hi, I'm Magpie 2541, and I'm here with...
Zazubaar.
Yes, we've been planning this video for the past few weeks, and we finally found time to get it done. And I understand that you're doing a film, so why don't you go ahead and plug that here right away?
Oh, okay. Yeah, partially the reason we haven't been able to get together for the past 2 weeks, amongst other things, is that I've been working on a movie that's going to be coming out in June. I haven't released many details about it, so I'm still going to keep that very hush-hush, but it's going to be coming out in June. The movie is called Werewolf of Carl Place. It's going to be a horror film. And I'm very excited about it. And we're currently in the latter half of pre-production, so we're going to be starting filming that next week. So when it comes out in mid-June, be sure to check it out. It'll be coming out here on YouTube, and it'll be free, so you don't have to pay for it. So there's no excuse. So you can check that out when it comes out.
And it will be free to the world, so there is no excuse of countries to really...
Unless you're in Germany. Germany has this weird, like, hatred for me. I don't understand it. Because I have German blood in me, which doesn't make any sense. Like, anything that's vaguely, like, has copyrighted material in it, even if it's, like, a song that might accidentally be playing downstairs in my house, taken down for copyright in their country.
I know the feeling.
It's weird.
There's a bunch of videos of mine that are blocked there. But anyway, we are going to be talking about foreign films and specifically their relation with their distribution in America.
Mm.
Where Zazubaar happens to be from. And
Yep.
I've got a few films that probably I'm going to mention during this that I think should have been handled better during distribution, and a few other topics we'll probably touch on. But uh, yeah. The first thing I want to say is where okay, where was I going?
So it's okay, dude. Just in your time.
Okay. What brought this up, actually? Okay, I'll go with this route. It was when I heard how the distribution was being handled for one of my favorite films, Tomorrow When the War Began, which is based on a book of the same name. And I was hearing that it was essentially being released sporadically and was not being going to be immediately released to DVD a few weeks later. So that was kind of harsh, in my opinion, especially when it came to the US. And I want to mention that I got that information from Pretty Much It and their YouTube channel. So I don't know how reliable that is, but it didn't seem to do well in the US. So, and
Yeah, there's a good kind of way to break into this topic a little bit. What happens oftentimes nowadays, as opposed to like say 30 years ago, maybe no, 40 years ago actually is better comparison point in the U.S. Nowadays, foreign films basically are locked into DVD releases, and DVD releases that you can find in the bargain bin at Walmart. We don't really get many foreign films released in theaters anymore, and especially not in wide release. Like, you get a couple who get lucky enough to be picked up by a couple of movie theater companies, and they'll be played very few show times and only like a couple weeks, because these movie theater companies are aware that unfortunately Americans don't show a great interest in foreign films. Unless, of course, you're like a film student, and that's a very small kind of demographic. So they don't pick up these movies, and they don't, release them because they know they're not going to make money, which is unfortunate because Americans miss out on so much great cinema that way. It's a really big shame. But the other, for like 40 years ago, or even 40 or 50 years ago, you go back in American cinema history, movie companies were way more what's the word? Like outgoing to release foreign films here in the States because there was a potential market for them. I think one of the pioneers, and I'm going to bring up Japan a lot because that's the foreign film market I'm most familiar with, but
yeah.
One of the pioneers of foreign films being released here and being very popular here was Akira Kurosawa, who's a very famous Japanese film director. And one of his first big, huge successes here in the States was Rashomon. And or if you say that in some other way, but I'm going to say Rashomon. And the film did not do excessively well by the standards of American-produced films, but in terms of its market, it did very, very well. And it created this market for future films such as the Godzilla franchise to come along later and do very well in a domestic market. And it doesn't happen anymore because American audiences just want American-produced film, which is a shame.
I didn't know too much about the deal with distribution, so thank you for filling me in on that. But so with this, you do believe that the American markets are missing out on a great deal of stuff with their release. Is there any? Yeah. And with you, especially with the Godzilla franchise, you'd love to see a Godzilla movie that wasn't 98 in theaters. Surely you would.
Yeah, and we're getting one in next year, so thankfully that's happening. But to even distance it from the Godzilla franchise, just to bring this up quick, if foreign films don't get put on DVD in the U.S., or even if they do, sometimes this happens, they'll get remade in the U.S. with American actors and an American screenplay, just based on the premise of the foreign film. There was a vampire film about 4 years ago. Yeah, 4 years ago. I think it was 2009. I think it was called Let the Right One Slip In. It was based on a poem. And I didn't see the film myself, but I know about its history because it was one of those cases where the film was very popular amongst critics and amongst kind of art house goers, because that's where it was seen in the U.S. But of course, it didn't make enough money for it to be considered a success in the U.S. It was just kind of a critical sleeper hit, not even a sleeper hit, kind of like the thing like under a sleeper hit even. And what ended up happening was American studios got their hands on it, and instead of just dubbing the film or editing it a little bit for an American audience, they just decided to completely reshoot it, and then re-release it as an American film. And that practice, I'm not a big fan of. How about you?
No, and I'll give you an example.
Sure.
And it's fairly recent. Okay, somehow, someone, I don't remember which studio, got their hands on a big hit series out here in Australia called Kath and Kim. And they decided, okay, we'll make our own version of this. And they cast some great, some former Saturday Night Live talent. The woman from Superstar, she played the mum, and there was someone else that played some very thin actress that played Kim, which was sorry, I can't remember her name, but she was the chick that Sarah Michelle Gellar made out with in Cruel Intentions.
I wish I knew who she was now.
And the guy, there was someone else in it, a pretty good cast, but I think one of the key things that was missing was the chemistry and realizing where the humor was coming from. And they completely wrote out another character that was played by Magnus Sabansky, which you might know from the Crocodile Hunter movie that came out.
Oh.
Okay, she was the big woman in that. That kept popping up. Okay.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. She and like they completely wrote from what I could tell and from reading up on it, they completely wrote out her character, not realizing that Uh, this was a good. She was her character was a great source of humor, and like even though she was classified in the show as guest star, you could pretty much say she was one of the main stars because there's very few, if any, episodes without her at least coming in to the show.
Yeah.
And part of the other reason is why this worked so well is because all the people that were involved with it had been working together for years. They've been working on. They're very talented comedians that worked on Fast Forward, Full Frontal, and did a couple of other series in between. And there's a reason why these people work well together. And you take it, and they didn't bother just saying, "Okay, we'll play the show over in the States, see how well it does." No, they had to make their own version of it, and you have part of the thing with Kim is she's not a big girl, but a very curvy woman.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm.
so she's not a stick figure, and she's got that kind of American Paris Hilton type attitude, but hasn't got the stick figure like body for it. So that part of the humor is that comes from that, and yes, Kim is a bit of a bitch, but you got to remember, you can play that character in such a way that she's still endearing to you, so you still root for her. And the woman that played Kath is actually younger than the woman that plays Kim, so there's and she can be a bit of a bitch as well. But yeah, again, she's endearing. You still root for her. You still want them all to succeed in whatever they're doing. And Kel, that's the name of the guy. Again, another actor that is also a very talented comedian, but also has history with all these other people as well from Full Frontal and other things. So they knew. So when they were casting, they knew that they could work with these people. It's not just a bunch of random people coming on. And of course, the show goes over, airs in America, lasts for one season, then it's cancelled.
Mm-hmm.
And gets bad reviews.
Yeah, the thing is, based on the example you just said, when you recast it for an American show, it seems to me like they're picking cast members who are going to draw in an audience because what American audience is going to know about this show from Australia. So they're not going to watch the show based on the title. They're going to need actors to lure in unsure American watchers, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Since it worked in Doctor Who, that's why they cast Eccleston, and that worked out great.
Yeah.
But in terms of a show where you're just casting the entire show to draw in a crowd, then you lose the chemistry you just mentioned. It loses what made that show so great, what made that show work. And then at that point, what's the point of adapting when at that point you could just call it something else? I'm of the mindset in terms of foreign film and media of any kind that as long as it's in English, there should be no even attempt to reshoot it.
True.
At all.
That's my stance as well.
I just think it's a waste of time. I am so glad that didn't happen to Sherlock, because it almost did.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah. The company that actually ended up making Elementary just originally wanted to make an American version of Sherlock. And thank God they didn't, because the only reason I think Sherlock is as brilliant as it is because of Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman, their chemistry. You take that out, then you're just left with an empty mystery show, I think.
Yeah. And the reason, too, that I as I brought up, the chemistry between all those actors is what made that show, is what made Kath and Kim work so well and work for so very long.
Right. And then when you take that out, it just doesn't work anyway, and then it lasts a season, like you mentioned. It looks like Elementary is doing well, so, good on it. And I think that it was better for them to do their own version of Sherlock Holmes as opposed to remaking Sherlock. But I don't think there's any reason to reshoot a TV show if it's in English. There should be no even question about it. Because
what's wrong with having a show set in a show that's made by Australians And I mean, you can at least be familiar with the situations. It's not like it was there was a lot of slang going around in there. As a matter of fact, there's this thing that Aussies say now, which is "look at me, look at me, look at me," which is a catchphrase from that show, which is what Kath says to Kim. She's always "look at me, Kimmy, look at me, look at me, look at me," and me and my mum do that all the time because we watched that show and it was very funny.
Yeah.
And but that, do you want to head back to movies for a minute?
Sure.
Is there any like English films that you think, wow, they sure missed the boat on that one or something? Why even bother? I mean, Bond is sort of the exception to the rule here, I think.
Well, the thing about James Bond, and I talked about this when I did the video with Tori GNR1 and the Real Manos. We talked about how James Bond doesn't really stick around in England when he does show up there briefly in the films. It's a very global kind of franchise, and it's not very English centric. It's very much so an international kind of franchise. And I think Bond feels very Americanized, even though it is considered a British film. And I think the reason for that is because they try to make it as accessible to everyone as possible, because James Bond is a mass media kind of character. You got video games, you got books, you got everything under the James Bond title.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that there hasn't been an attempt to separate the English-made Bond from the American Bond, because there would be no point. Because there would be no distinction, because James Bond is as much as past Bond films have not made a big deal out of the fact that out of London itself, let's say, being English is still a major part of Bond, and if you take that out, you lose a major part of his character, I feel.
Yeah.
That's why an American Bond could never work, because James Bond is the English spy. That's just what he's known as. But when you look at Skyfall, and much more of it is set in England, it turned out to be great, because England is not this alien foreign land that Americans are just so alien to. It's pretty much, I mean, of course there are going to be cultural differences, but nothing where it's like Americans are going to feel so alienated from this that we have to Americanize it. This has to be like New York City. I just think that's pointless. And thus I stay by the stance that as long as it's in English, there shouldn't even be a question to reshoot it. But actually, I want to take this to non-English films now, if you don't mind. Like stuff that.
I just want to point out first, I have not seen Skyfall. The last Bond film I saw was Casino Royale, and I didn't particularly like this new Bond.
Oh, really? I think Casino Royale is brilliant.
Yeah, it was. It was a very fun ride, but I think I missed Pierce Brosnan, to be honest.
I don't know. I prefer Daniel Craig quite a bit, just because he brings a darker edge to the character that I like a lot, and is closer to the books. But here's the thing. In terms of foreign films, the question is, the question used to be, should we dub it or sub it? Was the original question. How many films nowadays that have come out within like the past 10 years are dubbed on a major scale?
Not many.
Very, very few.
If any, I can.
Very, very few. Why? I think that because, the last movie I saw that was dubbed specifically for an American audience was Godzilla Final Wars. And that was 2004. And I don't buy a lot. I'll admit I don't buy a whole truckload of foreign films every day and come home and analyze them to see if they're dubbed. Aside from like the typical Spanish and other languages stuff that gets put on DVDs, it's never like a major job that requires an entirely separate cast to come in and do the to do the voice work. It just doesn't happen anymore. And I think that's just because that American studios have just come to a place where, audiences don't care. Just sub it or, give it a little bit of a dub. This was like 3 actors and we'll put it out there and it's going to sound terrible, but who cares? It's a foreign film. No one's going to buy it anyway. And I think that mindset is the exact reason why foreign films have such a small impact on Americans. Because if the movie studios don't even pretend to care, then why the hell should we? You know what I mean? Because, at its core, making a movie is your attempt to make your audience care about your subject matter.
Mm.
So if you're not going to show passion for it, then of course the audience isn't.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that there has to be a change in the philosophy of American studios and how they treat foreign films. Are foreign films ever going to be as popular as American films? No. I'm talking in domestically. I'm not saying American films rule the world. No, not at all. But just domestically, Godzilla's or anything is never gonna be bigger than say Mission Impossible or something of that nature. Just Americans are always going to prefer to watch a movie in their own language and also in their own kind of culture. It's just this sense of they see themselves in the movie, so that they feel more of a connection to it. But I don't know. I still think that there has to be a change, and we have to treat foreign films with more respect, and also treat them with this passion that we show for American films, because that'll give American audiences more incentive to care themselves.
Fair enough. I agree with that. It's frustrating for me because I've seen Tomorrow When the War Began, and that was such a great film that I think was accessible because, there's every kind of character in that film. There's a guy that's relatively funny, and he goes through this character arc in it, and it becomes more serious. And you've got I wouldn't say every man, but because it's a woman, the every woman who's kind of there telling the story. And you've got the religious person who's trying desperately to hold on to their faith all the way through this film and has to finally make a decision. And you've got the stoner character.
Of course you do. Gotta have...
Yeah. And you've got the love interest as well. And you got the ditzy Hollywood type girl in there as well, who's kind of sheltered, who's gorgeous, who doesn't realize it, which is bizarre.
She's pretty. How rare are these days?
Yeah, she's it's kind of weird because you look at her and you're like, hello.
Looking up,
but you got all these. And you got these characters, and you wouldn't even know, except for a few times where they say that it's Australia, and one particular shot in the film where they actually, duh.
Yeah, and let me say this, and I think you'll agree. Isn't it kind of restrictive for you to remake a movie like that for American audiences, set it in America? Because isn't it more interesting to explore the culture of a foreign country based on their cinema? And if you take that element out, then you're missing something from the original screenplay because it was written in that atmosphere. So I think it's restrictive, and also, it's just a little bit ignorant just to take out that element just because you're worried people aren't going to relate to it. I think the relatability comes in with these are people who live, who have humanity to them. And that's where you connect. But then you also get to explore how their culture is different. But at the end of the day, there's still people who you can relate to. So I think that that's another mindset that has to change.
Yeah. And what's really funny is because when this film came out, you know how a lot of places now, they're like, oh, we got to make this book series into a film.
Right.
Like you had with Harry Potter and Twilight. My argument for this is this book series was not just popular in Australia. It was popular over in America as well. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
There is a market here. And Paramount really should have looked at this and went, hey, we can make money off of this.
Yeah.
This series of books was very popular. Granted, we're going to have to probably update them a bit, maybe for the first one, but not much for the rest. But we can make money here. We can buy this book series and we can pump these out one every 2 years, and they'll make money if we distribute it right. Okay? There was like a ton of... this was like the first book in a very, like I think 6 books series.
Mm-hmm.
And then it spun off. So they could have made even more after that. To me, it's crazy because they could have made a truckload of money off this thing. Granted, maybe by the time they did the spin-off, they might have to recast, but it's not like there was a ton of slang in these movies, Aussie slang that they couldn't, like, they're not going to understand what that means, sort of thing. And I think I know what it was. Red Dawn was coming out, and they knew the Red Dawn remake was coming out, and this was very similar. And they were stacking all their hopes on that, I think.
Yeah.
And my argument is that this was more realistic because it was about Australian invasion, and guess what? They didn't actually win straight away. They didn't just... Because I've read what happens with Red Dawn, like essentially 2 weeks after the film ends, the war comes to an end.
Yeah.
That wouldn't happen. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
This was like... It's like Australia gets invaded. Guess what? It's going to take some time to kick everyone out.
Yeah, well, the problem with a movie like Red Dawn is that it's and I'm not a big fan of Red Dawn, either the new one, and I haven't seen the remake, so I
haven't seen either one.
Oh.
I just read what happened.
Oh, well,
I was like, God, that sounds like...
Well, the point of Red Dawn is not to try and be realistic. It's just trying to be a patriot. It's very jingoistic. Very much just like America.
Fuck you.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not a big fan of. I mean, I love my country, but I'm not like going around saying "fucking America, man. It's the only way to go." No, I live in America. I like it here. I'm gonna stay here. Everyone has to fuck American, man. And that's very much so how Red Dawn is, in both the new one and what I've gathered about the remake. And it's funny because the remake has a lot of foreign cast members who are playing Americans, so that's hilarious.
Isn't Thor in it?
Thor is in it. Chris Hemsworth is in it.
He's Aussie.
Fucking character too. That's hilarious.
He's Aussie. He's Aussie. He's playing Patrick Swayze's character, isn't he?
Yeah. I'm just not a fan of that kind of jingoistic stuff. And it's kind of funny that we bring it back to that because, the whole mindset of take every foreign film and turn it into an American thing is very jingoistic itself. Man, can we edit this part out? Hang on one sec.
Hang on
just 1 sec.
Okay. You were saying?
I was just saying it's a very jingoistic mindset in and of itself to take these foreign films and remake them, just because you want to turn them into an American product, because that's the only way you'll think Americans will consume it. It's just something that bothers me.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad it didn't happen to Sherlock.
Yeah, I just wouldn't feel right unless we mentioned the whole Rowan Atkinson thing, because apparently the whole point to being the ultimate disaster movie was to try and have Rowan Atkinson be a big hit over in America, and that's probably part of the reason why the film is based in America as well. It's because they felt, okay, let's bring this character over. And the movie did all right. It just did the same as everything else that he does. It's like, it does okay. It doesn't do great, but my problem with that movie is it doesn't seem like a Mr. Bean movie.
Mm.
It is very American humor in it that Bean is doing. So it's not great. It's just there's things about it that bother me that are like.
Yeah.
And besides, Mr. Bean is not my favorite thing that Rowan Atkinson does. It's Blackadder is my favorite. I prefer that sort of character from Rowan Atkinson than the Mr. Bean thing.
Yeah. I don't know. My problem with something like that is if you're going to adapt the character or not adapt him, just like put him into a different setting to go to a wider audience, then don't change the fundamental comedy the character is using, because then you're not going to get people into that character. You're going to make them think that that character is something else. So the hell's the point?
Yeah. And they kind of implied that he was retarded, and I don't think Mr. Bean is. It's just he's a child in a man's body, sort of thing. I think even Rowan Atkinson himself said that. And it's like, yeah, it's just, well, yeah, he's going to make mistakes and everything, but it's essentially what. That's my opinion on the character, anyway.
Yeah, and it's just like this oversimplification, just so people who don't know about the character can accept it.
And I think it's fair to say that Mr. Bean was pretty well known in America. They could have based the whole thing in London and wouldn't have done anything different.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's that's something that would annoy me too. There was another TV show I wanted to bring up that wasn't Sherlock. That got remade for America, and it did really, really bad.
Red Dwarf.
Oh, I didn't know that got remade for America.
It did. They did a pilot for it, and the story is essentially on one of the DVDs. Like, I think it was just before the 5th season was starting. Or maybe it was the 4th. Either way. Okay. They were going to do an American pilot, and essentially the pilot was pretty much the same as the British version, except there was they dropped American references in there because it was going to be an American type situation as opposed to a British one, which I was fine with. And they cast quite a few British people. They cast the woman, one of the women from Frasier, the one that Niles falls in love with, as the computer, because this was the time when the computer was female for a while, and they cast her. She was going to be like the one woman on the show. They got an American guy, and I don't know, it was okay, fair enough. He was more like the guy from Firefly. Was a pretty good looking guy and everything, and I was fine with that. The cat was pretty much the same and everything. It's just, it sounds to me like there was some problems with the script and everything, and they were trying too hard with it. They were trying to, we got to put this in, 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 sort of thing might have been happening, and essentially the control of the show was taken away from the original creators of it, and they said, stuff this, we're out. Like, originally they were going to get the guy that played Rimmer to come over as well, so essentially it was just going to be, you got the guy that plays Crichton in there, who wasn't in the pilot, but they made room for him, so that's fine. Then they got other people in there, and essentially it sounded to me like they were trying to get as many of the British actors over as possible, and I was just like, why?
So at that point, what the hell's the point? Just fucking put the British show on American airwaves then.
My understanding of it was pretty successful as well over there. That's why they were wanting to take it over there. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, this is why we have BBC America. Yeah. Guess what? People like British television, Doctor Who and Sherlock, withstanding that. There really is no point. The British shows especially, because we have so much access to it, there is no fucking point to Americanize it.
Yeah.
I just think it's a waste of time.
Okay. Here's something interesting. Apparently, there was a show out here, hugely successful. It was on television out here for over 11 years.
Wow.
It goes over to America, and it's on some ragtag network. I don't like. When I was looking it up, I was not familiar with the channel. It wasn't like ABC or UPN or NBC, CBS, or anything like that. It wasn't even Fox. So I looked at it, and they said it was on for 2 seasons, and then they took it off the air. I was thinking, okay, fair enough. Okay, there was... Now, granted, early on in this show, there was a lot of Australian slang. But essentially, I'm thinking, it was on here for 11 years. Why hasn't it gone back over to try and try and do something with it? Because essentially, here's what it was. It was a police show in a country town.
Right.
What's so unrelatable about that?
Nothing, because we have those constantly.
Yeah. And you had... Okay, and you had some very attractive women in that show, too. Let's just say when it was out, you wanted to be pulled over by a female police officer, hoping that it was one of these women, especially when you're traveling in Victoria, because it was based in Victoria. But yeah, so there was some, and there was like, it got to the point where everyone was dying every week on that show. But initially it was like normal country town problems. But I think they go, well, let's just have someone die every week. But there's eventually they had the drug thing come through at one stage, and then you had a murder every week or something. But it was very Agatha Christie type. Not much CSI, because this was before CSI, but it was very mystery type show, and it was pretty good. So I'm very surprised that didn't go anywhere. I think initially they were just with the show they were like, oh, we can sell it to some channel over in America. Okay, we know where.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but that was that, and it was like some network wanted it. Fair enough, go.
Yeah.
And
it's funny though, because sometimes adapting foreign shows for America and reshooting them does actually work. Point in case, Power Rangers. Power Rangers was based on a Japanese show that lasted for like 25 years. And they just took the most recent season, reshot it with American actors, and gave it a whole different premise, and it's still fucking on the air now. So, I mean, Power Rangers just celebrated its 20th year anniversary. So, it's just like, there's a way to do it. And, I grew up with Power Rangers, and it's not the greatest thing ever, but there's something about it that is entertaining. They retained the essence of the original source material and just gave it an American spin. They made it work for American viewers. And it still works. I think for the audience it's going for. I still think it's a good kid show. And I think that the heart behind that is just because they're taking the same premise and just making it something that Americans can watch. I think Super Sentai was one of those few TV shows that should have been adapted. They did it, and it worked. They would go so far as to close down entire sections of American cities just so they could get footage that would match up with the original Japanese footage. So, I think there is definitely a way to do it. You just have to you have to be very creative, and you have to be very respectful to the source material. And I think Power Rangers was one of those things that lasted because of it, because the creators were not afraid to go to certain extents to match up with the original, but also to change it so it could work for American children. So I think that Power Rangers is it's a strange example for sure, but it actually strangely worked.
Yeah, I didn't watch the. I got to know all this stuff about it through Mr. Fusion. I didn't even know for ages that it was shot partially in Japan. But it didn't surprise me when I found out about it. I think I heard about it when the show was on, but I didn't really pay much attention to it at the time. But yeah, I did. I grew up with Power Rangers. I was in the target demographic when it was first on, and I agree with you. It should have worked. And here's an interesting fact for you: where was the movie, the first Power Rangers movie, filmed? Mostly.
Seattle, I think.
But parts of it were filmed in Sydney,
Oh, that makes
Australia.
sense. Okay.
Yeah, and where they shot the where the Power Rangers first land on the foreign planet that they get beamed to, where they've got to find the Great Power.
As vague as that
That
is.
is essentially 20 minutes away from where I live in Kiama. That rocky shore that they land on,
Oh yeah.
that's in Kiama, and it's not very far away from where I live. So,
Still have all
and I've
the
been,
monsters on it.
yeah, I wanted to go out there and just check out where they filmed it because I still don't know exactly where it is, but I know I can tell from where it is that it's Kiama and everything. So yeah.
Are you gonna go search for the Great Power, Magpie?
Yeah, I'll search for the Great Power and find it without any trouble.
It's just like this giant glowing orb that just is just labeled the Great Power. How does no one notice this? I don't know.
Yeah, and like, how does no one get past that dinosaur or anything? It's like, God, it's got to be the easiest power to get.
I know, right?
Mm.
Because those just exist in the real world. Don't you fucking know
Yeah.
about the bone dinosaurs? God.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, as far as cartoons go, they mostly get dubbed.
yeah. Anime is a great example. Anime is one of those few things that definitely is usually because an anime is a weird thing to remake, and it's never really been done. Like Pokemon, Dragon Ball Z, Yu-Gi-Oh! These are all shows that just got dubbed, and they were definitely edited for American viewers, without a doubt. And there was stuff that was produced specifically for America. Like I think the movie was just made for American audiences, unless I'm incorrect about that. Um, for Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm talking.
Yeah.
But that's a case where you just took the original Japanese stuff, edited it down so it could work for American television format and be suitable for American viewers, and you just dubbed it, and it made them into popular shows. Pokemon is still fucking on.
Yeah. Um,
I think Yu-Gi-Oh got canceled like a few years ago, but
yeah.
it's still around.
I think it's got some spin-offs, Blue Dragon 5, and I talked about that extensively. You can listen to our 3 hours on animation.
And DBZ
Yeah.
is of course getting a new movie this year.
Sweet.
Yeah,
Okay.
we need a new one.
Uh,
No, but animation is one of those few things where usually they get locked out, and they usually just adapt. Because again, it's a weird thing to reshoot just for American audiences.
yeah. Um. Okay. Yeah, but that's true. They edit it down and everything, and I'm from what I've heard vaguely, that's probably a better idea because there's strange things about that. And I know Power Rangers and Super Sentai are very different as well. From what I saw in Mr. Fusion's thing, is that you've got these gods and death and everything in Super Sentai, and it's like all technology based for Power Rangers, which is probably the better way to go, I think.
Well,
With
the
that,
thing is that Japan has this very rich mythological kind of background. There's a lot of
Yeah.
creation myths about Japan. There's a lot of, household gods and stuff. And a lot of different religions based around this. So there's a lot more stuff that based around mythology. I mean, American culture, it's a bunch of different kinds of, cultures. So the one thing that they all have in common is technology. So when you introduce a show that needs to have these colorful, techno kind of characters, technology is the best way to explain that in an American context. There's definitely still magic present in Power Rangers, but it's very much it's created as the villain, and it's also enhanced by technology.
Yeah.
So I find that very interesting. I've never seen Super Sentai, so I don't know if it's better. Which, from what I've heard, it's a little bit more. It takes itself a little bit more seriously, which I suppose is better off for that show. But I don't know. I think it's the idea, the concept of reshooting stuff, foreign stuff for American audiences or for domestic audiences, depending on where you live. It's a very kind of case-by-case thing, but more often than not, I'm opposed to it. Just because more often than not, it's just better off to put the original product right up on its legs and give it to Americans, because it'll probably be better than anything we can come up with based on it. But Power Rangers and other stuff was better for it, because it knew that the only way it was going to be successful was to do its own thing with it. But I'm glad stuff like anime is pretty much just straight, dubbed and adapted, or not even adapted, just given to American audiences, because that's how that became popular.
Well, and as you said earlier, if it's in English, why bother reshooting it if you're gonna do essentially the same show just with a different setting?
Yeah, again, with English, I don't even understand why they bother. There's just no point. If it's something like Super Sentai where it's Japanese or another language, you have more ground to go on. But unless it's so foreign to Americans that it's just not even watchable for an American, then I think that it's still better off just to dub it and put it in the hands of Americans like they did with Ultraman. So again, it's a very case by case thing in that regard, but again, more often than not, I just say give us the original product.
All right. Well, we're coming up close to an hour on this. Is there anything else you want to add before we sign off?
No, not really. I think I've kind of covered my views on foreign films in relation to domestic. It's one of those markets that I would like to see expand, and it probably will. Foreign films go through this very strange kind of cycle of sometimes they're very popular, sometimes they're not. But I would definitely like to see a rise, so to speak, of foreign films again, because the fire rises. But that
yes, it does.
it would be nice to see that come back.
All right. Okay. Anyway, I agree with you. English, just put it out there. If it flops, it flops. And especially if you're a partner in the project. And my view on foreign language is if you can reshoot it and make it more accessible, that's fine. But just be careful and stay faithful to the source material.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for listening.
Very well.